Hi, and welcome into this Telstra virtual event. I'm Justin Cleveland, and I'm joined today by a couple of spectacular guests here in person, and we have some extra special guests coming in and joining us on the phone in just a couple of minutes. So we'll introduce them in a moment. But I hope you've grabbed a sandwich and are all settled. If you haven't had a chance to get lunch, now would be a great time to grab something to eat and listen to us as we run through some ideas coming from the retail sphere. In particular, things that came from the NRF Big Show. That is a great little, well, not little. Little is the exact opposite word that I want to use to describe it. But a very cool show that happened in New York just a bit ago. So we'll get into all of the minutiae of what happened there in just a moment. But first, there are some widgets along the bottom of your screen. Feel free to pop any one of those up. A lot of different things that you can do here on the platform. Also, move around the boxes, resize, and get them to fit on your screen as best you can. So, with no further ado, let's run into this event, and that is the big ideas from the Big Show. First of all, joining me on my right is, not that you can see us anyway, but he is, in fact, on my right, and that is the Retail Industry Executive for Telstra, Gareth Jude. Gareth, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Justin. Happy to be here.
Also joining us is the Executive Chairman of the National Online Retailers Association, NORA, and that's Paul Greenberg.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. Hi, Gareth. Lovely to be here.
And as I mentioned, we've got some extra special guests joining us on the phone, and we'll get to them in just a moment. But I want to start off by talking a little bit about the NRF, the National Retail Federation. Now, this is an American organization, correct?
Yeah, it's an American organization. It's the retailer's peak body in the States. Does a great job, and it's run this big show in January for, well, way over 50 years, I think now.
Yeah.
And it is the meeting place for retailers around the world. Most of the world's big retailers are there, and obviously the technology supplies to retailers as well. 33,000 delegates. It's a massive show.
Well, why should people go? Why should retailers who operate perhaps a few stores within a geographic region, or even if they're a national retailer in Australia, why bother go to something like this?
Look, as Gareth said, it is the big show. 35,000 attendees, it's massive. But really, there's something there for everyone. There's obviously some fabulous keynote presentations, both from the big end of town as well from the smaller, more innovative businesses. And obviously, the expo hall is endless, with showcasing all the latest technology. So really, it's personal and professional development, great opportunity to network, and certainly there was a nice Aussie delegation there.
And I think the reality for retailers today is they are in a global market, whether they like it or not. Even if your business only exists in Australia, you are trading against international brands in this country, but also against online, which is the whole world.
Yeah.
So you need to have a view on where the world sits.
Yeah, there are very particular products that I grew accustomed to in the United States that I can't get here.
Yeah.
I can maybe get an analog, I can maybe get something that's close, but it's not quite what I want, and it's not that much more money to be able to ship that in. So there's a legitimate concern there that you have to be not only aware of what your competition is doing, but be able to adapt.
Yep. Yeah.
Agreed.
So you went for the first time, was it a couple of years ago, Gareth?
Yeah, look, I went first time last year. It's in January, it's in New York, so there's a few weather obstacles to attending. But I got a year's worth of inspiration out of it. I found it fantastic last year. And I thought I might be a little bit disappointed this year, second time round, but I wasn't, because if anything, I got more out of this show than I did out of the last show, and we'll talk about some of the things as we go through.
Yeah. Oh, and I wanted to segue into FIRE.
Yeah, so my first visit actually to the big show, so just jumping on Gareth's point, I actually was an annual pilgrimage to the Internet Retail Conference in Chicago, the RCE, which is a very big event. But I think the NRF have really nailed that intersection of physical and digital, and I guess we'll be talking a bit about phygital a little bit later. But one of the hats I wear, of course, is as the chair of NORA, the Voice of New Retailers, an industry collective, a not-for-profit industry association. Go to nora.org.au to find out more about us. We were invited to take a seat at the table at FIRE. It's the long word, the Forum of International Retail Association Executives. 40 of my counterparts from around the globe. Why did we take the trip? Well, clearly the world, as Gareth said, is flat and it's borderless in new retail. And I think there's an enormous opportunity for Australian retailers to move into global markets. And so that, I think, is an important first step by joining FIRE.
So what is the representation from Australia? Are we well represented at this conference?
Gareth, I don't know if you want to jump in there. Frankly, I was a little disappointed with the attendance, but do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so look, the attendance from Australia is small. Mm-hmm. It's probably 40 or 50 people. having said that, there's a lot of obstacles to Australians attending. Distance, of course, weather, of course. It's our holiday period, it's summer holidays. But it's also, for most retailers, if not the number one trading month of the year, then the number two trading month of the year. So there are lots of reasons why it's difficult to be there.
Well, you bring that up, and that's a good point. I think I want to explore that briefly, and that is, I've seen a lot of studies that say January is now, if not surpassing, at least catching up to December as being the month to shop. Why do you think that is?
People have the time. So especially if you look at the categories, in the homewares category where people need time to consider a purchase, it's always been strong, and it's getting stronger.
Yeah. And some good promotion activity in January, really the Boxing Day sales and the New Year's sales are powerful.
Yeah. So the point here is that this is really an international conference, despite being called the National Retail Federation. It is an international conference. If you had to look back, because both of you were there this year, what was your number one takeaway from the event?
Well, for me, it was this focus on innovation, which we're going to come to and talk in more detail about. But, innovation's talked about a lot in all sorts of forums, but it's not a retailer's first language. A retailer is focused normally on execution. They're not normally taking the time to reflect and look to the future, but there's a real imperative and a sense of urgency in the industry about innovating to survive. So that was the big thing for me.
For me, the final nail in the coffin, that customers don't think by channel, they think by brand. And we've been saying that as of many retailers in Australia, that, we need to take a brand view. If customers don't think by channel, and we are as an industry, omni-channel, multi-channel, clicks, bricks, pure play, then we're creating a bit of a disconnect. So that was patently clear. The channel definitions are over. Customers engage with a brand, and multiple touch points are the way to go.
So people want a thing and they don't care how they get it. Is that really what you're saying?
Yeah, I don't think they're conscious about how they get it. I think they traverse their brand of choice in different ways, depending on location, convenience, time, etc. We've just got to move away from a channel perspective, take a whole view of customer, because that's how they're seeing us.
Yeah. So I had a good question actually just come in from the audience, and we'll get into big data and its role in all of these discussions in a moment. But obviously, like you said, there are some barriers to attending this. What if we don't want to do that? What can we do locally? Is there anything like this locally?
Well,
that's a no.
No.
I'm
going to jump in. I am a fan of online retailer. I think there's a bit of branding to do. They run that in mid-year July, usually in Sydney Showgrounds, and they're doing some excellent work. I think some of their staff would have been over there. So I think online retailer, and I think there are other events that will rise up to meet the need. Clearly, the industry wants a convergence, wants to learn, and yes, America, there are impediments. It's a way to go. So I think there is stuff happening locally.
Yeah. Interesting. So I want to get into the big data issue because it seems like that was a big takeout. And Gareth, run me through what is the idea of big data? Why are we needing it, and why aren't we using it better?
Well, the picture you can see on screen now is the opening keynote. And the opening keynote unusually didn't feature any retailers at all. It featured people from the sports industry. And the sports industry, in a way, is in the same position as the retail industry. It's transitioning from being a retailer-driven function to being a data-driven function, and that's what they all spoke about. All these sports industry managers, how important data was for their businesses.
Well, it's easy, I think, when we look at a sports stadium, because sports, you go in, you can track the people, you can look where they're going, look what they're doing, but sports has become so multi-channel that if you're not understanding your customer, you're missing out.
That's the point. So in the US, you may be aware that if you want to go to a Dallas Cowboys game, there's a 20-year waiting list. All the tickets are sold for 20 years. So the real way to generate more revenues from that fan base is from the people watching the game.
Yeah.
The 49ers talked about an app they've just developed. It has only 160,000 users, but 80,000 use it during the game. So the level of engagement is massively increased. So they've, again, increased stickiness to the brand that Paul was talking about, and the revenues have increased accordingly.
Yeah, I think sports is a good example because you see people walking down the street wearing New York Yankees caps, and to the point where it's become the brand is just a clothing brand less than it is a sports franchise. It doesn't matter how the team is performing, people will still wear that. I think that's a good example of the ways that we can adapt to that. Now, in terms of big data, there's collection issues particularly for retailers. And maybe, Paul, this is a question for you because in the digital space, it's a little more innate. Do you think that we're doing well in collecting data?
I think there's a question mark for a while. I mean, everyone knows that data and insights are the big opportunity, the main game. Clearly, from a channel perspective, online retailers seem to have sort of moved ahead very quickly in optimizing the data they collect from customers. But clearly, one of the exciting innovations that we're seeing locally and overseas is, in-store location-based marketing, where you get that whole view of a customer, both in the digital and physical intersection. I think there's some really exciting innovation happening. But I think Gareth would agree, none of this is easy. And I think the danger is, you come in as, just taking a high-level view. There's work to be done at floor level, but there are tools, there is innovation, there are entrepreneurs who are optimizing the opportunity and making it easier for retailers to get into the game.
And one of the things I took out of that sports presentation was that any analysis is better than no analysis.
Right.
The idea that there's a silver bullet that if we wait long enough, we can buy the silver bullet is not the way.
Yeah.
The journey is start analyzing something and build on that.
Well, do you think there's anybody out there in the marketplace now that's doing it well in terms of data collection and then data usage?
In Australia or
anywhere really, anywhere that can be a model.
Well, I think the ones that speak best about it in retail are probably Macy's from the US.
Okay.
And they have spoken about this for a couple of years, and they're doing a lot of good things on analysing the customers and changing their retail format as a result of that.
And John Lewis, I know, Gareth, they never failed to impress, and again, this was another good presentation by them.
Yeah.
I want to go ahead and ask you a question, you in the audience. Do you feel that you in your business make the most of your customer data? Yes, that you could do better, that you collect it and don't use it, which I feel is a crime, and you don't collect customer data at all, which I understand because there are many small retailers that may just not have the resources to do it immediately. But there's a lot of data that I feel like is being left out there by retailers in particular.
And I think there's a criticism that retailers often, use the data but don't necessarily use the insights in the right direction. I'll be really keen to hear from our fabulous guests today on how they're doing it in their business. It's applying the insight.
Well, we wait for those results to collate. Gareth, do you think that data is something that is, I guess, what do you think is the role of data in a retail business? Particularly, let's aim at like mid-sized businesses, mid-sized retail businesses. Not the mega chains, I feel like, have it down, or at least have an idea of what they need. But in a mid-sized business.
Okay, so look, it's always been important. The second job I had in a retail store, I worked in a clothing shop, and the owner of the shop knew everybody in the town. When somebody came through the door, he knew them, he knew their wife, he knew their kids, he knew where they'd been on holiday, and he definitely knew what they were going to buy next.
Right.
The national chains of the day in the UK where I grew up came to town a number of times and then went away. They couldn't beat him because he knew more about his customer than they did.
Right.
And that's all data analytics does for you. It allows you to know more about your customers and the competition. And for me, this is going to be a really big challenge for smaller retailers in the next decade, because the chain retailers, and we've got a couple of guests from chain retailers on the line, now have the ability through data to actually understand the customer better than that individual that I worked for all those years ago could ever know.
I was with a big retailer yesterday in Melbourne. They said we're sending an EDM out to 3 million customers, and we're sending out 3 million individual EDMs. So that one-to-one relationship is now very much upon us. But I'll also throw out there, just to maybe get the conversation buzzing a bit, is I did meet with one of the retailers, I think from T2, and there was a counter-argument, as there always is with these things, that we don't the pendulum doesn't swing too wildly. And she was saying that we mustn't forget that retail at its core is a deeply creative endeavor, and that heart and head are the ultimate combination. If we get too clinical, too scientific, we might lose some of that emotional connection with customer.
Completely agree. And in the sports presentation, they ended by saying we must not forget this is the sports industry.
Right.
We're in the inspirational experiences business.
There you go.
And that's what retail is.
Yep.
It's the inspirational experience business.
Well, no matter what, if I want to go buy an iPad, it doesn't really matter what store I get it from. But if I have a good experience in that store, I'm going to have a positive correlation looking back when I want to buy the case for that iPad, those sorts of things. So let's talk about some of the big ideas that came out and a particularly good speaker.
Right. So we want to talk about We'll move to innovation now.
Yeah.
And there was a number of presentations on innovation, but the fellow you can see on screen is James Curley, who's the newish CEO of Levi's in the US, 160-year-old brand. And he came on to talk about innovation. He came on singing, which was quite scary. He came on singing Revolution, the Beatles song. And he not only sang it, but he sang it as imagined by Bruce Springsteen. So it was pretty scary. As you can see on screen, he had the leather jacket and the Levi's T-shirt. But it was a really great speech on how retailers can innovate. And, you know, his whole message was on about not throwing away the core. Keeping, if you're an iconic retailer like they are, or an iconic brand, or you don't need to throw away any of that heritage to innovate. You just need to add on. So his message was all about and he came up with a great phrase. One of his little sections was on creating simplicity and sophistication in your business. And he expressed that in the phrase, the business mullet. So he said to the customer, the business must be simple. They must be able to select a pair of jeans really easily, have it got to them any way they want, being able to search any way they want for the product. But that implies a huge amount of complication or complexity at the back. But the customers mustn't see that.
No, the customer never needs to know that it was difficult for you. In fact, I'm dealing with an online retailer now where I ordered a microphone because I want a microphone, and they're having supplier issues, which happens. But it's one where, as long as they're good with the communication with me, letting me know, hey, here's what's going on. It's going to be here soon. I'm good. But if I start to see that, you know, the rat scurrying around in the warehouse, then I'm going to become concerned. I, as a consumer, need never see that.
So, Paul, we might like to talk about innovation in the industry associations because they're real generators of innovation in retail over there.
Well, that's great. I hope you would, because I did have a mullet in the 70s, and I thought I was going to be outed there for a second. I've moved on from my mullet phase. But yes, look, again, you have to hand it. I mean, I'm in the industry association space, relatively new, nor is Australia's newest collective, just over 2 years old. So we've certainly got a lot to learn. But the NRF shop.org model, in my view, is the ultimate association model. The National Retailers Federation would be well over a century old, a very old and very sizable collective in America. And they had the good sense over a decade ago to bring in their digital arm, which they named shop.org.
Yeah. And
they run a sizable event, I think, in Seattle every year. I haven't been to that either, and I should go. But they work very symbiotically. I guess it's that whole digital piece again, where they recognize the intersections very well. So although they serve, the NRF do incredible lobbying into Washington, of course, and then shop.org do a lot of focus on innovation. But the way they work together is fabulous. And most importantly, the way they celebrate retail, to me, was the take-home. You know, retail is a tough game, but I think once you're in it, you love it and you stick around. I mean, but they really sell retail in both to government, to the public, and to the industry as a fabulous career, a rewarding career, and a recognition that, you know, in America, then they've got their numbers sorted. 1 in 4 jobs in America is either in retail or very much linked to retail, right, with all the different elements of retail. So that's a very powerful voice that they have into government, and everyone is celebrating the opportunity that new retail presents. And I came away with a palpable excitement. As you said, Gareth, and you told me before, that it gives you real energy. And I'm very excited and very keen to work with the other associations in Australia to make sure we deliver the same kind of momentum, excitement, and enthusiasm.
So there were some specific things that came out of the industry association sponsorship of innovation. This is one of them on screen now. This is shop.org competition, and they ran a TED-style kind of debate-off from 5 or 6 finalists for a national competition they run for innovation in retail. This one is a company, the winner, called Symphony, and they've developed a cloud-based mini ERP system that they sell on what they call business as a service basis. In other words, the more transactions you do over it, the more you pay.
Yep.
And this was purely fostered by shop.org. The prize you might see, if you can read that check, is only $5,000, small prize. But the prestige that this gives them through that industry association sponsorship and NRF profile will give them the gateway to great venture capital exposure.
Yep.
What I really like is that they're fostering innovation with this, and they're really sharing, because I think there is we can keep industry secrets to a point, but at a certain point the entire industry is going to get better when sharing things like this, things that can be done.
And that was a recurring theme. I mean, all the big retailers, Staples, Home, Nordstrom, spoke about, they've all got their kind of labs, and they all collaborate with these small entrepreneurial, younger businesses. So there's a real focus on collaboration. And, in this new sort of shift age, you can't do it all. They work. I mean, Westfield have their own lab, and Telstra, certainly, you've got yours too.
Yeah, I had a good comment come in that metadata is going to be a huge game changer with customer tracking and capturing digital signage and all the self-serve solutions. And I think that's a really good point. And we need to learn to deal with that now while it's still young so that we're not caught in a compromising position in the future.
Yep.
So let's continue on and go to a picture that I thought was an April Fool's joke or isn't that cute internet technology, but it's something where somebody is actually working on a technology to project essentially the screen of your phone onto your arm so you can check it in the bath, or if you're out for a run, whatever. Tell us a little bit about this and some of the other things that are coming out of this iLab.
So iLab is a section of the show where NRF focuses and showcases what they think are particularly innovative products that retailers could be involved in. This is a product called Circlet. It's a wearable, but its particular property is it projects your phone onto your skin. So the pitch is you can make phone calls from the bath. And this was just one of the innovations featured in iLab. Another one was Urban Farms. It's a company that makes farms in warehouses. And it means you can place, for example, a farm on top of a supermarket car park, and the supermarket can take its fresh produce directly from above it. There's some great stuff in that NRF iLab.
And I guess I know it's a well-used term, and I think many of us are coming to terms with the Internet of Things, but clearly it was a recurring theme. I mean, I used to joke in the early years when I was running Deals Direct, I used to say to our dev team, can you connect the toaster with a fridge, and can you connect the vacuum cleaner with a kettle? As a joke, with interfaces, but clearly that's happening now, and everyday common devices are being connected to each other. And so, that watch in the bath, and that's the way the world's moving.
And as Paul said, there was a couple of models from retailers that I thought were really interesting. Before we get into our guests, they were all talking about how they foster innovation in their own companies. John Lewis was really interesting, and there was a clip from their CEO saying, look, we're in the most omni-channel market in the world. We're the most omni-channel retailer in this market. There's no book to the future. We have to invent it ourselves. So they're very aware and cognizant of the fact that if they're going to develop, they need to foster it themselves. Coles and Tesco spoke on another situation, on another platform, where they talked about collaborative innovation and that they picked technology companies with their far-term view of the future and matched that with their own executional view of today, and they're creating some great things, particularly the Tesco innovations on imaging of recognition of planograms. I thought was pretty interesting.
So let's look at it from, say we're in a stable business, and my business has been operating for 50 years, and I'm good. How do I foster that innovation? How do I bring new ideas out?
Well, I think there's a couple of models that we've seen at the show. One is the John Lewis model and the NRF model, which is to simply run competitions.
Oh, yeah.
So we are going to run a prize, and you can use our space for a few months, and the winner will get something. That is the John Lewis model. It's been very successful. The other model is to collaborate. For retailers, collaboration is actually a way of life. So supply chain management is actually built on the idea of collaborating between manufacturers and retailers. And some of our supermarkets today have hundreds of supplier representatives with desks in their offices collaborating on supply. What we were hearing at the show is there's this collaborative model of innovation possible where retailers and technology companies in this case get together and share their different skill sets to imagine the future. In fact, we should probably use this opportunity to bring the first of our guests in to the conversation, which is Richard Umbers. Richard is the Chief Information and Supply Chain Officer at Myer. And Myer have 67 stores. They're Australia's largest department store. But before Myer, Richard's also been at Australia Post, Woolworths, Progressive and Aldi. So he's got a long and senior career in retail. And it would be great to get Richard's impressions of the show, but particularly Richard had the honour of speaking this year at NRF. And it would be good to hear a bit about that, Richard.
Okay, thanks, Gareth. I actually spoke as part of a section which was all about customer experience and in particular the role that emotion plays in the purchasing decision of a customer. But the angle that I took was playing really to my passions around e-commerce and logistics, and in particular how the market in the Asia-Pac is evolving, because after all, Asia-Pac and particularly China is the primary producing manufacturing area of what's being sold online. And interestingly, because of the rise of China, it's also now the primary consuming area. And it's ironic to me that product is actually going all around the world because it's being manufactured over in Asia-Pac, it's being sold online in markets in America or in Europe, but actually it's then promptly getting shipped back in quite large quantities back to Asia-Pacific. And as a result of that, Asia-Pac probably has a very significant role to play in the future evolution of what is a global industry of e-commerce. And you look at a business like Alibaba, which is obviously now coming to the attention of people over in the US with its recent market listing. It's going to become the largest retail network in the world, surpassing Walmart in as few as 12 months' time. And yet it's relatively new for many people over that side of the Atlantic. So that was a topic that we talked about quite extensively as part of the show.
And Richard, when we were there, we had a brief talk about innovation, and I know that's something you're interested in. Was there anything on the innovation front that you took out of the show?
Very much. There were a number of themes that came through very strongly for me as part of the show. Obviously, there was the omni-channel and the physical-digital convergence, which I know we've all heard about for a few years now. Innovation came through really strongly, as you said, but there was an interesting line on that innovation is a lot more than just the creation of ideas. In fact, that's really just a creativity concept. What I saw coming through was a lot of companies talking about the importance of execution of creativity as being the thing that marks innovators apart from the rest of the market. And I, was thrilled to hear people like John Lewis talking about, as you described it, their J-Lab and so on, how they're actually not just focusing on, all these small ideas that are out there, but they're actually putting their own mechanisms and their own processes and their own organizational structures in place in order to be able to actually create the executional component of this. And it's all about delivery at the end of the day, and I was thrilled to see people emphasizing the need for us to really get round what is actually required to bring innovation or creativity to market, not just the generation of, wow, isn't that a terrific idea. And the final theme that I thought was absolutely very exciting to hear was, we've been talking about customer experience for quite a long time now, and the role of customer satisfaction and so on. But I saw an interesting additional layer to that, where people were actually starting to say, well, look, just satisfying the customer is only taking you so far. What you actually have to do is build some kind of emotional connection in from your customers. And we saw some terrific examples of marketing campaigns in the section that I was involved in that were all about how you can actually weave a message that appeals to the human heart into the marketing and into the advertising. And we saw some great campaigns from, in fact, John Lewis is another good example with their Christmas campaigns that use the penguin, for example, and also sold stuffed penguins as part of the store to create the cross-connection. And British Airways, who had a terrific campaign to appeal to the heartstrings of people who are living away from home. And this idea that customer satisfaction is only a halfway stop, and what you really need to do is trigger a deep emotional connection in your customers in order to create a real lasting loyalty.
Richard, that's a great synthesis, and absolutely all resonates with me. One of the themes that came up in quite a few of the side keynotes as well was this whole concept, again, not new, of failing forward, that leadership and company and culture needs to embrace the fact that we are non-linear journeys now, and that small failures would have to be the stepping stones of success. Did that come through for you, and you endorse and support that?
It certainly did. I think this is the theme that I was alluding to around what it actually takes to bring something to market, because in an increasingly collaborative style of bringing those ideas to market, I feel that organizations need to have new structures and new governance and new methods for bringing new ideas on track and giving them the oxygen they need, particularly in the early stages. And I think the concepts of lean startup, which are starting to now gather some traction in large organizations, ideas like minimum viable product, MVP, and the idea that failing fast is acceptable in large organizations are also now starting to get significant traction as being important themes that need nurturing and developing if large organizations are going to be successful in innovation in the long term.
Richard, that's great. And thanks for that. I'd now like to bring in our friends from AMS on the end of the call. We have Jules Cardinale, who's CIO, and Mark Finocchiaro, who's the Managing Partner and Director. And AMS, if it's not familiar to you, are the brand or the business behind My Chemist, My Chemist Warehouse, and a number of other pharmacy banners in Australia. They're actually the largest pharmacy group in Australia. So both Jules and Mark are absolute long-distance runners. They did the CES show in Las Vegas and then came along to the NRF show in New York back to back, which is a fantastic effort in the middle of January for two Australians. So I'd like to start by asking Jules and Mark, what motivated you to devote that big lump of time in the middle of January to coming to these two trade shows?
Well, firstly, good afternoon, everyone. I'm enjoying listening in on the conversation. I guess it's not unusual for two Australians to travel the world and look for bigger and better things. But our motivation specifically for CES, it was to see what consumers and customers how they were going to engage with technology, which is always interesting. It's really at the forefront of technology. And I guess then to go to NRF and see what the industry what it was going to do to provide this technology and how this engagement was going to take place. So we sort of tried to look at it from a customer perspective or a consumer perspective, and then I guess get the retail innovation and ideas and just sort of see where the two were going to meet and possibly try to work out the time frame for that to happen. Jules, our CEO, and I'm sure Jules will speak for himself in a moment, but looks at how all that's possible. So I'll hand over to Jules.
Yeah, I suppose the thing is that I went with an open mind, and as such, sort of wanted to ratify some of the ideas and the goals we've set ourselves to achieve this year. The interesting thing is that I got so much more from it. That there was a challenge at first at trying to connect the technology at the show, to what we do. And I think that the thing is that we had to take it at a conceptual level and sort of lateral rather than a sort of literal, and we're able to connect those dots and work out different ways that we could perhaps apply the technology that was on show. I think the thing that excited us the most was the practical application of big data, and providing that interactive, targeted experience to the customer, and the technology associated with it. There was an awful lot on show that was targeted, and I think that was sort of the main thing for us was the technological takeaway from it was the practical use of big data. We've been talking about it for years and years, but it was on show and it was practical.
So, Mark, any other highlights for you from the show?
The highlight, I suppose, again, to re-emphasise what Jules was saying, is the big data and how it's being used. At first, it was a little, I guess, frightening as a consumer, perhaps, how much big data knows about you. And then, from the other side of that same coin, how innovative it is that what a retailer is going to show me, present to me, how they're going to create this experience is almost tailor-made. It's exactly what I want, when I want it, and how I want it. So I think that was the exciting thing, is that transitioning from possibly this big, scary, big brother experience to super efficient, exactly what I want. I'm a very busy person, and you've delivered exactly the experience, how I wanted it, when I wanted it. And I think that's the real power that we saw through it.
And I think that also on that is that we've spoken about it, is that we have to be careful of how we deliberate, to not appear like Big Brother or to be, overbearing. I think we need to be cautious on the way we use it.
Yeah, people are trusting you, and they're a lot of times self-identifying this information. But if it seems at all creepy, they're going to pull back, and it's going to impact your brand negatively.
So, Jules, that's a good time for us to go back and reflect on the first poll question, which was about big data. Mm-hmm. Can you put the results of that up again?
Let me pull that up for you. So we were talking about, do you make the most of your customer data? About 14% of you say, yes, you feel that you do, but the vast majority, about 60% of you say, yes, we collect it, but we could do better with it. And I think that's a good place to be in, because you recognize that there are improvements that you can make.
Yeah,
so on the journey. Yeah.
I think you've got another question coming up now.
Yeah, in fact, let's talk about some of the ICT priorities, because you were talking about some very interesting things there in terms of the technological usage. And so let's ask, what are you as a business owner, what are your priorities for business owner, business partner, anywhere where you're in the business? Are you going to innovate? Are you looking to incorporate more big data? Are you building a systems platform for expansion? Are you incorporating more social media and building that, what Richard was talking about, that feeling of a brand loyalty? Or are you investing more in mobile? So while we let those populate, Gareth, when you're looking at a business and perhaps you're giving some recommendations for them to expand, where would you say is the best place to put money?
It's definitely horses for courses. So it depends where the business is. When I talk to small business, the easiest one of these things to do is social media. Mm-hmm. It's quite easy to get into. I think overarching all of that, you've got to work out how you're going to innovate. Mm-hmm. Most retailers start with a great idea, and they usually bet their house on it. So they're usually pretty confident and innovative and fresh at the start, but that often is their only idea. Mm-hmm. And as the years pass, that goes stale. Mm-hmm. So I think you need to make a commitment to innovation at some point. As far as the other things that go on there, if I listen to the John Lewis presentation, they were very much about building a systems platform for expansion. They commented specifically on their Black Friday results, which were outstanding. I think something like £42 million on the day. And the CIO was presenting. He said there is no way we would have coped with that volume on our own platform. So having the back end sorted out was huge for them.
Right. Well, it's a balancing act, though, planning for expansion and the actual expansion, so that you can afford to continue planning for expansion. Yeah. If you build this big back end and ultimately never do anything with it, there's a lot of resource waste there too. So it's difficult.
So how are we looking on the results there?
And also, it looks like a good balance between expanding that social media presence and building that systems platform, and also innovation. I think based on our previous results, a lot of people at least have an idea on big data and know they're going to do something with it. And the mobile is less or so. I'm sorry, Paul.
No, lest we forget, talking about mobile, before 6 months ago, Gareth, you released the white paper, Mobility is Changing the Rhythm of Retail. And if we were looking for validation of that, well, that was profound. And I think the John Lewis example, was it 58% or something of transactional traffic came via mobile, and up 70% on last year, something extraordinary.
Yeah, well, mobile is unbelievably important now. If you look at the big day in China, which is Singles Day, which is their equivalent of Black Friday, 62% of the transactions were done on mobile. John Lewis was saying that on Black Friday, the UK Black Friday, it was 58, as Paul said.
All right, there you go.
58% of transactions were accepted on mobile. Mobile is a hugely important device, not only now for browsing, searching, keeping in contact with the customer, but it's now emerging as a transactional device and overtook computers for the first time in the US over Christmas.
That's the tipping point we can predict.
Do you think things like Apple Pay are going to help establish that as in the market?
Well, I don't think it hurts, of course, and I think it's inevitable that the mobile phone will become our payment device in the future. But what I wanted to do now, I think we've got Anik online.
Terrific. Hi, Anik. You're on board?
You still there, Anik? Maybe she's got a phone on mute.
Yeah.
Well, we had Anik online, so why don't we speak for Anik?
Yes.
I'm sure she'll like it.
Yes.
And we were Anik and her organisation.
There you go.
Yes.
All right, okay. All right.
Hi, Nick. Welcome back.
Oh, hi, how are you?
Yeah, pretty good, Anik. So we've been talking previously, Nick, as you've heard, about the role of industry associations in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
But also we're really interested in, through this call and through other mechanisms, encouraging retailers to get to the NRF show.
Yes.
You came up with a really interesting initiative for that, which I think deserves more airplay. So this was the opportunity for you to tell everybody about that.
Okay, sure. So look, the conversation initially started when we were talking to the industry associations about the kinds of events and support that we could give in terms of encouraging businesses to in Australia to educate themselves and also in retail and the trends in retail, and also looking at what opportunities they might have overseas in terms of expansion. So the Big Show was one of those events that was put forward, and so we encouraged retailers, obviously being a Victorian government initiative, they were Victorian retailers, to consider attending the Big Show, and particularly the Trade Expo, because from our perspective, obviously, it was also giving them the opportunity to look at some trade opportunities for themselves, as well as have some learnings along the way through the conference, should they wish to attend. So that was essentially our objective, and we had really strong interest from a lot of retailers based here in Victoria. We had a small delegation travel across, and I think with more time and more planning, I think, looking forward, I can imagine that we would have a greater attendance.
And Nick, if I can jump in and thank you as well, for your interest and support. And just as importantly, Nick's a senior executive with the Victorian Government Business Office, and she heads up retail, fashion and creative industries. You've got a terrific office and some great colleagues slap bang in the middle of New York. And they were very generous with the Australian delegation. They took us around. They took us right to the inside of some fabulous retailers. So there really is a connection. There's help at hand if Australian retailers want to leg up or foot up.
That's right.
In the States.
Yeah, so we have we have quite a few offices. We have one in New York. We also have one in San Francisco, Washington and Chicago. So there are plenty of touch points in the US for retailers, and I would strongly encourage that retailers who are looking to tap into the US market to touch base or connect with our office, and we can do introductions. But most definitely, there's that Victorian government support there.
So what we're going to do, Anik, we're going to provide a link in the feedback to this event to your sites, which will help you explain in more detail what the incentives are that are available to retailers who want to possibly go to the show next year.
Yes, absolutely. That'd be great. And the other thing we're also looking at, retail obviously is a huge employer in Victoria, and so we have a very strong focus on the sector, and we're also looking down the track any future events beyond the Big Show as well that might meet some of the needs of retailers when they're looking at their expansion into markets, and not also just the US, but any other markets that prove to be a strong opportunity for them.
And that was a great and generous support that you gave to the retailers that went.
Well done.
Yeah, so let's ask you in the audience, would the incentive offered by the Victorian government have encouraged you to attend the Big Show? Let's say, for the sake of argument, if it were offered by, on a national level, no matter where you are in Australia, would something like that encourage you to attend an event like this? And it's actually not, it's great that it's being done, but it's not unique. There are incentives like this for people in the United States, right, Paul?
Yeah, I think speaking to my Ferreira colleagues, again, there were big attendances. Brazil was 3,000 attendees, France 2,500. And Gareth explained some of the impediments perhaps for us going. But no, I think most governments and most regional state areas are offering some kind of incentive, because retail is such a big employer and such a catalyst for growth and for economic activity, and certainly new retail. as I keep coming back to, is such a powerful opportunity with its innovation and technology.
Well, that's definitive. Yes, 100%. People say.
Okay.
If anybody knows anybody, New South Wales, all over, let's get this started.
Well, now let's give Nick's phone number out straight away.
No, that's great. I mean, that's the kind of response we do want to hear. If this meets, the needs of businesses, we want to hear that. So absolutely.
Yeah. Can you lay out for me what the incentive was for this?
So the incentive. So just to be clear, we supported businesses to attend the Trade Expo. So your business needed to have an interest in trading in the US, whether it was whether you were going to educate yourselves about those needs and the opportunity, or whether you wanted to go over and create some networks. And our officers over there could actually, if you were quite particular about who you wanted to meet, we have quite a strong retailer database in our offices over there, and we could facilitate meetings and things like that as well. So that was essentially what we were offering, and then sort of a bonus on top of it was obviously attending the Trade Expo and being able to connect with other retailers, looking at the innovation opportunities there and the technology opportunities there, and then we ran a program with other big players and essentially took a delegation through. So generally, as a general rule, we tend to support at a level of up to $2,000 to attend. That essentially covers your airfare or accommodation, etc. And when you put in an application, and when you come back, you submit an evaluation form, and then and your receipts, and then we will honour the $2,000. So it's not a huge incentive in terms of big dollars, but I think for most people it was enough to tip them over the line to actually attend.
Every little bit helps. So, and again, we'll get you some information for everyone on the call, so you can learn more about this program, and we'll send that out. So, Nick, thank you very much for the time.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Nick.
Now, just to wrap it up, it wouldn't be a big show virtual event without talking about some of the products that were at the big show. Yeah. So I'll just pick a few highlights of the things I saw. The one that's on screen now is from a company called AVA Retail. And this is a camera-based product. It's based on Xbox camera technology. So when you take one of those products from the shelf that you can see, the features of that product and a little snapshot of the product shows on the digital media screen that are there. And it can apply to any industry. So if you took a shoe off the shelf to have a look at it, a video on the shoe would come up. So I really thought that was quite engaging. The next one I think we're going to put up, there's two I think on the next slide.
The first one is McDonald's.
All right. So this was something, that Telstra doing something similar to this. But this was McDonald's using beacon technology to collect information about customers and their movements and their buying habits, but then sending them relevant content when they're in the store to encourage purchase. And this is just an example of that being done. The company was VMob. They're a New Zealand company, but they've moved to the US, and they've got a lot of this sort of technology with McDonald's. The final one was probably the hit of the show, and this is Perch Interactive. It's digital media tables. And the same idea, you can see in the shot here that when you take a shoe from the table, all the features and the benefits of that shoe appear on the screen below it. The best example of this, if you're going to New York shortly, is Dylan's Candy Store on 59th Street. It's set up by the daughter of the Lorraine family.
That's right.
And it's full of these tables. They've got candy on the table. You pull the candy off, and it tells you about all the candy, how it's made, what ingredients, and so on. But this is on the theme of engagement. Mm-hmm. So we've talked about big data and analytics, but this was such an engaging thing, I think, for retailers that it could be really effective.
Yeah, I know we do something similar at the 400 George Street store. That's very neat.
So we've, just as we've done something very similar to that McDonald's thing, with McDonald's actually, we're doing something like that shoe example in our George Street store, 400 George Street. And it'd be great if anybody's on the call from Sydney to get down there and have a look at it. The customers love it.
Yeah, and the thing that I think has to be balanced out is novelty, because it's cool at first, but there has to be ultimately content and something that's a draw that gets you to return beyond that. And what can you do? What can retailers do to keep things fresh?
In terms of my pick of New York, because you had to do a bit of shopping therapy while we were there, was nrml.com or normal.com, terrific store in the funkiest part of Manhattan of Soho. 3D printed headphones. I wish I could show you a picture, but I've got one in front of you. Now, I've got odd-shaped ears, as many of us do. So this is measured to size by a nice app, and then it's printed out for you, 3D printed, perfect. An audiologist would have charged you a couple of $1,000s for this a few years ago. So brilliant 3D printing, I think, is here to stay. I think we're seeing the beginnings of exciting innovation. And here's a really good example. Young entrepreneur Nikki Kaufman, nrml.com. Awesome business.
Okay. Anything else that caught your attention at the show?
Oh, plenty, but we haven't got all day.
Yeah, absolutely. So the one final question I'd like to ask you on the call is, will you be attending next year? And I think we've provided some good examples of the value for the NRF Big Show. So would you go? Would you make the trip out to New York? Yes? No? Or would think it over? Which is a legitimate question, because I've been to New York in January, and sometimes it's less than pleasant. So, but it is a very good show, and I'm glad you two were able to go along with the people that joined us on the call. So thank you all for taking a few minutes, talking this with us. We've got some great questions that we've come in. We'll respond to by text, and some people that want to get some more information. So again, we'll send out information about the Victorian government's plan, and there's a lot of very cool things going on in the retail space, and we look forward to hearing about them going forward in the future. We've got some no's, and we understand, like I said, been to New York, but a lot of maybes, and I think that's the best result that we can hope for, because you can get a lot of good information there. So thank you all for taking a few minutes and talking about this with us here today for this Telstra virtual event. In just a moment, we will a survey will pop up. Let us know what you found interesting, what you think could improve, and let us know how we did here on this call today. So for Paul Greenberg from the National Online Retailers Association, for Gareth Jude, the Retail Industry Executive for Telstra, I'm Justin Cleveland. Thank you much for joining us here today.